We're Laura and Cindy, and you're listening to the Holistic Horsemanship and Husbandry podcast, where we talk about natural horsekeeping and deepening your connection with your horse. I'm Laura, your horse care mentor. I teach natural horse management practices after working with over 200 horses and seeing how current industry standards are compromising the health of the horse.
And I'm Cindy, your horsemanship mentor, offering a proven and unique approach to creating deep connections with your horses from 20 plus years of experience, including working with wild Mustangs. If you enjoy this conversation, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to us so we can get this podcast into the ears of more passionate horse people.
So we have had some guests lately that have alluded to management of horses and how it affects their performance and their training and their mental state. And so we wanted to kind of dive into the dirty details of that and kind of talk about what is ideal. And then if you're in a boarding situation, if you have space constraints, if you have special health problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how you understand that and approach it with empathy and manage it and work with it. Because if your horse is in a state of physical or mental discomfort when you go to work with them, you are not getting your real horse. Think about when you have to go to work when you're sick. That's not the best version of you. And when you go to work when you're sick, hopefully you have enough space in your workday where you can be a little bit easy on yourself that day. And so some of this may be some changes you can make or some things you can look for, and some of this may be just opening your eyes to approach a situation with more compassion and understanding, depending on where you and your horse are at and what's going on in your world.
So, recognizing how your horse is feeling physically can often be pretty obvious. They're limping, they're lame, they're slow, they don't have a spark in their eyes, they don't run to meet you or greet you or whinny at you. I mean, all horses have their own way acknowledging their person. All of my horses, when they see my car pull up, I get several different reactions. Some come to the closest part of their pen, some nicker at me, some just acknowledge that I'm coming and go back to what they're doing. But I know what each one's typical reaction is. So if I don't see that in them, or I see something unusual going on, I don't immediately go to something's wrong, but it heightens my attention. I explore more closely, like, why are they doing what they're doing? Like, they're laying down, Sometimes they're just sunbathing. It's been super cold here.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just sunbathing. Sometimes they don't feel good. The mental part of it is often not something you realize until you go to catch them.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you don't realize it until you go to tie them up to groom them. If you tie your horses, I sometimes brown tie. What's coming to mind for me to share with the mental and the emotional well-being, we haven't talked about, the mental and the physical. We haven't gotten into emotional, but Rocky, my main horse, I've had to move twice in the last 3 months, which we've done episodes on what that does to them. And this new place feeds alfalfa or alfalfa mix. And I told her at the beginning we can try it, but it's not my choice of feeding. And he'd been there for 4 days and I took him out for a ride. I brought him, he seemed fine, happy to see me, grooming, saddling, warming up on the ground, everything fine, riding off the property alone for the first time. He was fine. We got down where there was some activity in the neighborhood and he was a little more alert than normal. I mean, granted, he's a retired police horse, right? So he should have plenty of exposure to lots of things. And we rode down to the pot into the power pole trail to the road, and then we turned around and came back. Well, as soon as we turned around, he started jigging.
Mm.
Jigging is that fast prancing, for those of you who don't know. Started fast prancing, I'm going home, I'm going home, which is not this horse at all. And so it was a great opportunity to work on training and connection and communication, and making the wrong thing difficult and the right thing easy. And then the next time I took him out was like a week later, went on a trail riding lesson with one of my clients, and he did good, but again, turned around and started getting a little forward on the way home. So we worked on that and it became a teaching lesson for my client. Well, then last Sunday, I took him. I didn't have time to ride. So I'm like, we're just going to go for a walk in the hood because I love to take my horse for a walk. Well, he was high-headed and very alert at everything, which is to be expected in a new neighborhood. Now, he's fine when I get there. He's fine when I halter him up. He's fine when I groom him. He's fine when we leave the property. Now we're on the road and he's a little high-headed, but again, you can say he's checking out his new neighborhood.
Yep.
And there's wilds around. We go to turn around to come home, and he immediately wants to go into that fast, prancy jigging. And I correct him and slow him down. Then he starts darting forward, trying to take off.
Lovely.
Then he's rearing up and striking at me, spinning, trying to kick me. And granted, he's a 1,500-pound draft mixed horse, and I'm small. And I'm under no illusion that I could lose this horse, regardless of my skills, at any time. So we make it home, and it's all because he cannot handle alfalfa. It's making him way too hot. I could feel him kind of confused at his own behavior.
Like this is an out of body experience for me. I don't know what's going on inside me.
Exactly. Like I don't know what's wrong with me, you know? And of course I didn't get mad at him. I got firm with him for our own safety. But that is one of those examples of mentally not doing well because of his diet change and physically out of his skin because of it. So I immediately contacted the owner of the facility, and I love her. It's a great private family situation, and said, we can't do this. So we either need or grass hay or I have to move. And she's like, no, we love him to pieces. Well, I'll go get him grass. I'll start him back on it tomorrow morning. So now I'm going to give him a week or two of just eating his grass before we make those attempts again. But that's a perfect example, at least in my eyes, of what Laura's talking about.
Yes. And like it is kind of out of your control. Like the facility that you're at prefers not to feed that. And you don't want to put him through another stressful situation of moving him again. You kind of had your hands tied. She probably, because it's such a small facility, I'm sure she would have let you bring in one bale at a time if you had to, which would have been the like last ditch option because that sucks to have to do as the human. But you gave him a chance to work with the program because that would have been the least like high maintenance border option. But no, it had to change. And it sounds like she's pretty cool and understands that horses have different needs.
Super cool. And
yeah,
she said the horse before him, one of the horses before him, could only be on grass hay. And I mean, I was like, when we got back to the barn, I'm like, okay, I will move him back with my herd. I will spend the money and build him his own pen and put him back with my herd where I can control what's going on.
Right.
But luckily we won't have to do that, and I'll be able to continue to easily ride him once he's come off of that. But nutrition plays a huge part in how our horses and how we show up every day.
Yeah, it does. And it's just important to know your horse. But if you really look at, like, this is bringing up kind of a thought for me of what if my horse has been in a kind of a non-species appropriate environment? Like alfalfa is for cows. It is not for horses. We feed it for horses oftentimes because it's cheap or because our horses need something extra on top of their grass hay. I never, ever, ever advocate for a horse to be on 100% alfalfa. The nutrient, the phosphorus calcium ratios are not correct. It has way too high of protein. The short stem of the alfalfa digests way too quickly. So they are spending longer times with an empty belly than they would in a long stem forage. So because of those things, it is not designed for horses, it's designed for cows. But a lot of times we feed it because in certain areas of the country on the West Coast for us, it is way cheaper than grass hay.
Well,
And then,
in some particular cases, it does have its purpose. But like Laura said, straight alfalfa is not good.
yeah, our old man
I,
at the
I
barn
have,
gets an extra flake of alfalfa every time we're there, like 4 or 5 flakes a week, because he needs a little extra oomph in his diet.
yeah, my
But
old guy is on alfalfa mix or
yeah,
grass
yeah,
because he needed that extra protein for body heat. And if he doesn't, because of his age, and he's not able to keep the warmth in his body like he normally does, and I am one who doesn't want to blanket my horses and take that natural ability of fending for themselves away from them. So he does get mixed hay to put that extra layer of fat on him, and it's working great. So alfalfa is not the boogeyman, but it's also something that Laura and I would not feed strictly.
it's something to be aware of if you're having, like, why is my horse being like this?
Yeah, why is my horse so hot?
Why is my horse so irritated? That hotness is oftentimes my belly is aching because it's empty and the acid is burning it because I digest that alfalfa so fast.
And the other way that you can feed, if you have to feed alfalfa, put in a slow feeder
Yeah.
so that they're eating throughout the day and throughout the night so that they are constant. And, really, slow feeders are the ideal way to go because horses are supposed to be eating 16 to 18 hours a day. They're grazers. So a slow feeder, if that's an option, that's always the way to go.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of like in an ideal world, every horse would be in front of hay 24/7. That
Mhm.
is not real life because boarding barns only feed twice a day. A boarding barn of 45 horses is not going to stuff your hay nets for you, but you can.
Mhm.
So we have, in the winter, it's a little different because we're trying to keep stuff dry. But in the summer, we just fill a couple hay nets for our feeder. So when she shows up, all she has to do is chuck them out for the day. It keeps her life super easy. She's really cool because there's only 2 of our horses and it takes her 2 seconds. If we get behind, she catches up for us. But, get together with a couple other boarders. Say, hey, I'm going to stuff hay nets on Wednesday. Can you stuff them on Friday and just keep them lined up? Your people can throw them in. How can you get creative within your situation? So if you're really lucky to have access to a low calorie, high quality hay, which I have not found on the West Coast of the United States, all the grass hay that we have is pretty rich.
Mhm.
And so I can't just throw a bale out for the horses and let them go to town on it. I have to control them with nets and smaller servings and timed feedings and all that kind of stuff. But if you have a horse that self-regulates, oh, let them at it. That's amazing. Give them a chance to show you that they can self-regulate. And then you only have to feed, if you can put bales out and put them in nets, you only have to feed like once a week.
Ready to unlock true freedom with your horse? Join Unbridled Freedom, our private Facebook group for women on a spiritual journey in horsemanship. We don't fix our horses, we transform ourselves. This is your space to embrace challenges, celebrate victories, and deepen your bond with your horse. If you're ready to lead with wisdom, compassion, and inner peace, join us today. Let's dance with our horses as one. The link is in the show notes below. But again, that's very hard because the only way that that works successfully in winter is it has to be covered and enclosed, because if it gets wet and it gets mildewy and you don't know it because you're only feeding once a week, now your horse is eating moldy hay and you run the risk of them getting sick. So you have to, I was on this, I think it was a track feeding site, but it might not have been. It might have been a feeder site where they had, God, like 30 different kinds of multiple horse feeders and single feeders for pastured horses. Now, feeding a horse that's in a stall and paddock 24/7 is a whole lot easier. You just hang their hay net in their shelter in their stall, and you don't have to worry about it. And you also need to hang it, not lay it on the ground, because they're going to poop and pee in it, because they're in a stall and paddock. Whereas if they're out in an open area, they're less likely. I say that because Gino, the one that I'm feeding mixed, they're less likely to poop and pee in it, but he still likes to poop and pee in it. So his is not only hung on his inside of his shelter, but it's also in a bucket, a big feeder bucket, so that he eats what spills and doesn't poop and pee in it. But I'm curious, Laura, because I use nets and I use hay pillows and I use them for different times. I use the hay pillows when it's windy, not wet, because those are on the ground, and I hook them to a post in their pens so that they don't drag them and they blow away. Before they did blow away. And then the hay nets get hung when it's raining so that the hay gets wet, but the water flows through it and doesn't stick in there and create any issues. And it doesn't get muddy. But you're saying you throw your hay nets out in your pen or your pasture type setting for your horses. How are you keeping them from getting their legs caught up in all that tie?
Oh, I should have been more clear. I'm using hay pillows, or we have like a full bale net and the bale goes in a trough and is like carabiner to the bottom. There is never a loop big enough for a hoof to fit through. That's how.
Yeah, okay. I use the single.
And this is for barefoot horses. Super important.
You cannot use any of what we're talking about.
There are so many people who hang a hay net in a stall with a shod horse, and it's your life and it's your horse. I would never do it.
And the only way that you can do that safely, and I'm going to correct this as I go, the only way that you can do that safely is to hang it high enough that they can't paw it. But horses graze on the ground for a reason, and it's for their esophagus, their trachea, and their lungs. If they're eating up, and their neck, their atlas and axis, part of their neck, their cervical spine. If they're eating high, that's anatomically wrong.
And presents as pole and SI pain.
Yeah. So if you have a horse that's shod, you got to feed them differently.
I'm just going to throw out a stereotype because it's common. If your horse is shod and living in a small stall and paddock, it's probably because you do a lot of riding. Probably in a show or something, some performance riding. That's the most likely scenario. And so if you are feeding your horse in that manner where they have to reach up super high and arch their neck in a way that isn't natural, like they're basically having to eat like a giraffe, then you're really counterproductive to your performance riding. which is just going to start compounding problems. That's something very important to be aware of. Now, there are things like portagrazers, which I think are probably quite a bit safer for the shod horse. There are options for that. A portagrazer, they're very expensive, but you can also DIY them. But it's like a big plastic tube that your hay goes in, and it has kind of like a small holes in the top. And as they eat it, the lid kind of falls down along the hay. It just slows them down and contains the hay. But anyway, all this to say, this whole discussion is about how can you increase your horse's hours in front of hay. Now, there's also kind of I call it starvation syndrome. And it's where at first, when you increase your horse's hours in front of hay, if they're used to being fed very sporadically, they might just hound the crap out of it, not walk away from the hay net until it's empty. And that's where it's really important that you pay attention. So maybe you mix in some lower calorie hay, like a teff. Again, teff is also very high in protein, so that's something to be aware of, but it's pretty low calorie. Or you do smaller amounts more often in a more controlled environment, knowing you're going to have to put in some work up front because their brain has to change its mind and realize, oh, this hay is here all the time. Like our horses got very fat going into winter, and I kind of allowed it because I knew we were going into winter as they learned, oh, I'm not fed at sunrise and sunset anymore. We always have hay. And now they've learned to self-regulate, and it isn't a problem. And we're feeding out basically 40 pounds of hay a day, and they're eating it. And waste is pretty low, except for when the rain comes and MJ decides to use some of hers to make a bed and lay in it, which Mom gets a little mad about, but that's life. But there is an adjustment period that is, if you're going through this, you're like, oh my gosh, my horse is hounding this hay. How am I going to make this work? Understand that their brain patterning needs to change, and you have to manage that slowly. So if that means feeding smaller bits more often or slowly increasing the hours or, getting creative around that, I do a little coaching around that if you need some help. But if you say, hey, I'm gonna, start increasing my horse's hours in front of hay, and all of a sudden your horse is eating more hay than you've ever seen them consume in your life, just know that that is probably temporary and does happen. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever looked at your horse and wondered if they're thriving in your care? Is there more you can do to give them the best life possible? Most ranches and boarding facilities are set up for convenience, not horse health, but there's tons you can do to fix your horse's situation if you're willing to get creative. Join Evidence-Based Horsekeeping, my Facebook group where members learn how to improve the mental and physical well-being of their horses. The link is in the show notes.
And if you have a horse in a boarding situation, this is really probably not something you're going to be able to do unless you
So, you know what I used to do in that case is I fed hay, a little bit of hay every time before. Like I never worked MJ on an empty tummy.
Well, yeah, I mean that we've talked about that in previous episodes. If you want to avoid ulcers, you need to it takes a horse 6 hours to digest a meal. So if your horse hasn't
6 hours to ingest long stem forage, that's so important. If you're feeding pellets, if you're feeding like that goes through their gut way faster.
So the rule of thumb is if you're going to work your horse, make sure you give them something to eat while you're tacking them up. If you're trailering them to a show or a clinic or a trail ride, I always have hay in my trailer so that they can eat on the way there and they can eat on the way home. But for those who are in boarding facilities, a lot of facilities are getting on board with feeding lunch, which is nice.
Yep.
The sad thing that I've found, and I get it, that's why I don't own a boarding facility. The sad thing is, if you're going to feed 3 times a day, it should be every 8 hours. So it's that 24-hour span. What I see a lot of facilities doing is feeding at 6 or 7 at noon or 1 and at 4 or 5 because that's convenient for their health. It really, it's better than twice a day for sure, but you're still having that 12-hour stretch of no food in their belly. So that's where hay nets are often handy because they will self-regulate. Like when I first started feeding hay nets, my horses took a while to figure them out. Some got very irritated with them, and some just enjoyed the puzzle and chomp, 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 chomp till it was all gone. But even in the beginning, I watched my horses eating for a good 5 to 6 hours versus done in an hour and a half or two.
Yeah.
So, being able to make up your own hay net, ask your facility if you want your horse to have longer food during the night. Ask the facility, hey, if I make up my nets and set them out, will you do this? And some will, some won't. I've set mine up in a way that I have chains with hooks on them in all my shelters and my pins, and I tie my hay nets in a way that there's a loop so that the woman who feeds my horses in the morning, all she has to do is grab my hay nets and then hook them each on their own carabiner, and off she goes. And my horses are eating, you know, probably 5, 6, some of them 7 hours. So you have to be able to decide what you can do with your situation.
And it might change seasonally. We mentioned it briefly, but like, no, you can't put a whole bale out in the winter. So for us in California, we're pretty mild, but even so, our hay feeder goes once a day unless it's piss pouring rain, and she goes twice a day. And we go from feeding all over the property to everything gets fed underneath the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe your horse gets a hay net all summer and they can't in the winter. Well, it's still way better to get them that all summer. And so allowing yourself to do your best within your situation and not getting caught up in, well, it's not perfect.
And even then, I mean, I'm making the assumption that your horse has shelter in the wintertime. And can you fit a hay net? You may not be able to fit a bale of hay net in there, but can you fit 1 or 2 hay nets, So there's
Yeah.
always a way to work it out, but we kind of have gone off onto feeding when this was more like,
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit more about like now the next piece would be physical movement and social interaction from your for your horse and how that impacts their mental health.
horses need a herd. And even if they're in a boarding facility where every horse has their own stall and paddock because they have shoes on, they're show horses, they're, a gazillion reasons why. Not a gazillion, but lots of reasons why. Um, they're still having that social interaction. There's still a herd. Um, it's better than having them off isolated by themselves. Boarding situations. Laura and I, when we say social interaction, we like to have our horses in with other horses. So they can groom together, they can sleep together. Horses sleep best. They hit that REM state of sleep when they're laying sternally with their head cocked towards their front leg and they're resting their chin on the ground. That is the position that horses take when they're getting REM state, when they're reaching that REM state of sleep. They also struggle to reach that state without having a horse standing over them, watching over them. So you'll often see that in multiple horse enclosures. When they don't have that, they don't reach that REM state. And that affects them physically and mentally and emotionally when you show up to take them out. So I've trained at barns that absolutely forbid horses to be turned out together. And often it's because they have shoes on. Other reasons is because they don't know each other, and you're likely to get some bumps and bruises and scrapes and bites and hopefully no seriously injured kicks.
Yeah.
But horses are herd animals, and they need that play, you
So the
know.
difference I see in a herd that's together all the time is that they have a very clearly established structure and they know each other really well. They know their foibles. Our two horses, they're just two, but they're a herd. MJ gives very subtle asks and then slams the hammer down when her subtle ask is not yielded to. And Rayman is an oblivious old man who could give a rat's ass about a subtle ask. Like, so if to the untrained eye, you're like, oh my God, MJ's being such a bitch. But it's like, oh no, she asked him way back when she was way over there to move over, and he completely ignored her. So then she moved him when she got to him. But they know each other so well that it's never a big deal. Even though she comes over and physically like body checks him over, like, hey, I told you to move over. He's completely unbothered by it because to him, that's how she communicates with him. When you're turning out for 10 minutes a day, you have the added, these horses aren't getting a lot of physical movement, so they're very excited to be turned out. And they don't really get the opportunity to eat together, to sleep together, to operate as a herd on the regular. And so it's a very artificial social environment for them where fights and like big explosive behaviors are way more likely to happen. And so it's just, I mean, interesting to me that a lot of boarding barns house horses separately, but turn them out together when they would see a lot less craziness if they were housed together. And then, like, when I'm riding or when I'm working with MJ, I put Rayman up. I don't want his help. He can go away for that part, you know? And so it's just something to be aware of if your horse struggles in a social environment that is a controlled turnout. That doesn't necessarily mean that your horse doesn't want to be around other horses or doesn't get along well with other horses. Your horse struggles to thrive in an environment that is not meant for them.
Yeah, I mean, every time I bring a new horse into my mixed, I have seen it take just a couple hours for that horse to go, okay, this is where I fit in. I'm at the bottom of the pecking pole. I'm okay with that. I will get to know one and become buddies and then work my way up. And then I have seen it take days, weeks, months, and I even have one who actually it took him a year before he realized that he had to fit in and know he didn't get to be the boss.
Yeah.
But it takes time. So, like what Laura said, when you're turning them out, 2 or 3 or 4 times a week together for 10 minutes to an hour, that's
Especially if like
really not enough
different
time.
mixes of horses are showing up every time.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
not enough time. That's like putting a group of people in a room together for 10 or 15 minutes and say, okay, become a team and be comfortable with one another. I mean, I'm not even going to ask you to do a task. I'm just going to say, here's your group of people around this table. You got 15 minutes to get comfortable with each other to the point that you can have a dialogue. That's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have your one or two, like we do in our herd, that's going to go, okay, I got it. And they're going to take the lead. They're going to elicit, they're going to start conversation, the name game, the whatever, right? So they might achieve that in that 15 minutes worth of time, but because they had somebody that could do that. And you can see that in herds of horses as well. You'll find that one who is like, okay, I'm going to keep the peace. Everybody just chill. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation that we're having because there is so many things that you can do to enrich your horse's life in domestication without living on a ranch with multiple acres and pastures and thriving abilities. There's so many different things you can do. And yet, if you're in a boarding situation, it becomes tricky. You know, Laura and I both, over our lifetime of having horses, we have had to search and hunt and try and luckily we do eventually find a place that meets our horse's needs, and the people are flexible. But I know that those are few and far between. So how do we help those people, Laura, who are in boarding facilities of 40 horses, install in paddock? The only turnout they get is when their horse gets to run in the arena by themselves when nobody's around.
Yeah, I would say definite twofold approach. One is building community with like-minded horse owners who can help you. I'm going to go on Wednesdays after work and hang hay nets. You're going to go on Fridays. I'm going to turn my horse out. When I turn my horse out, I'll turn my horse out for 10 minutes, clean his stall, and then I'll turn your horse out for 10 minutes, clean their stall, kind of a thing. Like, see how you can increase your capacity by doing more when you're there and having other people help you when you're not.
Great suggestion.
And then also weigh adjusting expectations. I made a stupid mistake for a trimming client a couple weeks ago. Scheduled her for the wrong, like Saturday the 10th or Sunday the 10th, when Sunday was really the 11th, and I showed up on the Saturday. She wasn't there because it was the wrong, like I messed up the date and the day and put it on my calendar wrong. And I knew she lived around the corner, so I was like, oh, dang it. I'm so sorry. I'm here. If I need to come back tomorrow, I'll come back tomorrow. This is my fault. She said, no, no, I'm here. I'm coming. Well, when she showed up, I immediately said, does he need some turnout before we trim? Because I knew that she comes and she sets him up for success before I show up, and I took her ability away to do that. And then he promptly was interested in the fact that I was there and didn't really take advantage of his turnout at all. So I adjusted my expectations on that trim and knew he might be a wiggle worm because he's been in his stall in his paddock all day and didn't really get any yayas out. And now I'm here asking him to stand still. And he actually did fine, probably because I didn't put a bunch of resistance and anger and in the first couple times he pulled his foot away when he was settling. So if you show up and pull your horse out, and maybe there's something like a lot of times when horses are kind of socially deprived, they're way more reactive to what the other horses are doing around them at the facility than they would be otherwise. So how can you honor that? Build in a little more time in your training session, get their attention back on you, not just get on and ride and be super mad that they're watching the lesson horse that's having a bad day over there instead of tuning in with you. Being aware and adjusting what you're asking.
I think, we're talking about managing your horse in a way that they can thrive,
Yeah.
right? A happy horse, not to steal from Linda Pirelli, a happy horse makes for a happy life. And when I first heard that name, I'm going to take a little sidetrack. When I first heard her name her program that after divorcing Pat Pirelli, I was like, really, Linda? Oh, you just have so much, to give the world, and you named it that. And then the more that I've evolved and kind of changed in my own way, that title of her program is so rich.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you don't have a happy horse, I did not have a happy horse on Sunday. I came home and after taking care of my herd and doing everything, my husband's like, so how was it? I'm like, it sucked.
Yeah.
I left happy, excited. My horse was not happy. He was not, he was a fire-breathing dragon that I did not know. And I mean, it was nice to see what he had inside him, right? Because was not his character. But a happy horse equals a happy life. Not just their life, not just your life, but life, for the two of you. So, if you're in a boarding facility and that's all you can do, which right now that's all I can do. I am in that situation. What can we do? What we have to do is we have to think outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Why do we have a horse? Because of how they make us feel, because they give us freedom. We can get out and feel like this powerful thing between our legs, and we can go do stuff, and they make us feel warm and cozy. But what about them? Why do we have a horse from their perspective? I'm playing more games with my horses. I'm hiding treats in balls, and I'm hiding hay in areas, and Rocky and I are exploring. And um when I go, it's like, today we're gonna do some training, we're gonna do some work, we're gonna do this. And then other days it's we're going for a walk, and I'm gonna let him show me where he wants to walk. I'm not gonna say we're going for a walk and this is specifically where we're going. It's like, no, take me where you want to go. Um, Not when he's a flying, fire breathing dragon. Um, we have body massage and Reiki sessions and essential oil raindrop sessions. I bring a book and we go out and we sit in the corner of this large arena that's barren in the desert and it's ugly as hell. But I sit with a book and a hay net for him, and I hide cookies throughout the property while he's eating his hay net. And then we go play the touch it game, which they know that means go find whatever she wants me to touch. So even though you might be in a facility that has their routine and they're not willing to acquiesce everybody, they can't. They can't.
No, they can't. Yeah.
What can you do?
Yeah.
And yes, if you want to ride every single time you go, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're making it fun for the horse. Okay, the horse is giving to you. What are you giving in return? If it's really about the relationship and the partnership, how did you enrich your horse's life? Please, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably either not that mindset or transitioning out of that mindset. Please do not always make it about my horse has to work. My horse has to perform. My horse has to get on the bit. He has to be collected. We're working on flying lead changes. Don't do that to them. If you find your horse is turning his butt on you when you show up, it's time to ask some questions. What have I been doing every time I show up? Play with them. I mean, when Laura and MJ were rehabbing for a solid year. I mean, it was longer than that, but the actual
The really
rehab
intense part. Yeah.
was a year. And all Laura could do was have interaction on the ground, fun, make it about her, still nurturing the relationship, still doing, that communication. Do you still back up? Do you still give me all of your parts of your body freely, because that's expected, not expected, but is expected. But she also spent a lot of time doing body work and bonding and massaging and laying in the mud, and so in our perfect world, we would all have track systems for our horses.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with what that is, Google it. It's amazing. The more that I've studied some of these groups on Facebook, to have a killer track system, these people are spending hours a day managing their track system. So it's not a one and done. It's an ongoing thing, but I love there's this one gal that has an herb garden and she has a grass section with multiple different grasses, and it's fascinating to watch what herbs the horses eat based on their needs and what grass they eat based on different days, different times of the year. I mean, in the perfect world, we would all have a track system for our horses. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is my horse lives in a 12 by 12 with a 24-foot run. How do we bring them together to find that happy medium? Because a horse living in a boarding facility is much like us living in an apartment and going to work and coming home and rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
So how do we spice it up?
And I think it's just like the big awareness we wanted to bring forward in this episode that Cindy just wrapped up so beautifully is, for most of us, your horse's life is going on for the 23 hours a day that you're not there. And the knowledge and the awareness of how much that 23 hours is impacting your 1 hour where you're doing the thing that you want to do. And how can you make it as good as you can make it within your circumstances, and realizing that that's going to have a huge impact. And I tell you what, when your horses are thriving because you got creative and didn't quit until you figured it out, it is the best feeling. It's so interesting that Cindy mentioned how your horses greet us. I think maybe, have I talked about this yet? I don't know. I apologize if I'm getting old and telling the same story over and over again. But our horses used to, um, at our old place, MJ would stand sullenly in the corner and let me go approach her. And Rayman would run to Connor, like, and she thought, oh, how nice is this? He runs to me. But the energy behind it was very desperate. Like, oh my God, Mom, you're here, so my needs are finally going to be met. Now, they look up, they acknowledge that we're here. They finish their couple bites of hay or, finish their nap or whatever it is going on. And they like approach us in a very calm way. That's like, it's awesome that you're here, but your presence doesn't mean a huge deal in our quality of life. And that shift in both of them was like, oh, wow, that's huge. How they're just regulated most of the time. Like, not all the time. I was there in the dark the other night, and there was definitely a wild animal moving through, and they were running around like psychos and snorting and hopping around and telling me there's a monster in the bushes. That stuff's always going to happen. But I certainly wasn't going to be like, okay, time to ride.
And we do the best that we can with our horses. And I think that Laura made I'm pondering on what Laura said. Your horses are living their life 23 hours, 24 hours, 24/7, really. And if you get out there every day, you probably aren't working or you work at home. And so you may be spending more than an hour a day there, but it's still a very important fact. How are they living the hours that you're not there? And what are your expectations when you show up? Especially for those that are only there 2 or 3 times, 4 times a week. And you have an agenda. And your horse has their agenda because they're not living the life they're meant to live. Horses were never meant to be ridden, people. Please, please hear that. Please think about that, okay? They were not meant to be ridden. They were not meant to be confined. They were meant to be grazing herd animals like deer and gazelles and, all those other animals, and it's by the graciousness of their beings that they allow us to do what we do to them. But when you show up 2 or 3 or 4 times a week for that hour or two, and your horse, we hear you calling your horse a jerk,
Mm-hmm.
or your horse is being an ass. I could have easily called Rocky all of those things and then some on Sunday. But the reality of it is, dude, what's happening? This is not you. You are as miserable as I am in this experience. You have a stall, you have a big paddock. This is not the horse that I know. So when you show up, have Laura started this conversation with, have some patience and have some compassion. They're living a life they were never meant to live, and they live it because they're most likely domesticated and they know no different. But that doesn't take their instincts away from them, and that doesn't take their needs away from them. They are herd animals, which means they're very, very social. They're very, very tactile. And if they don't get that from other horses, and we're the person that shows up and claims to love them, it's up to us to give that to them the best that we can. So be creative.
Mm-hmm.
And if you struggle with finding ways to be creative, contact Laura, contact me, there's a gazillion groups. A gazillion's my word today, obviously. There's a ton of Facebook groups out there that are doing things for the horse, not just for them. And it's fun because when you see your horse start to really get what you're doing and respond in favor, it's more rewarding than that wonderful ride that
So
we
much fun.
choose.
Yeah. So I want to just throw in before we close it off, if in listening to this episode you've started going, uh-oh, my horse is 23 hours a day is not what I want for them. But I also know how stressful and rough a move is. What's the right choice? Listen to your horse. Really take away, you know, I personally don't choose my horse's living situation based off of covered arenas and nice wash racks and how my tack is stored. That's that's a bonus if it exists, and I don't care if it doesn't. But really look at the options around you and your horse, and you will know. A stressful move for a massively improved 23 hours of the day is 100% worth it. I don't want you holding on to a situation that's clearly not working for your horse because you don't want to go through the stressful move.
Because they will adapt, especially
They
if
will.
you're aware and you listen to our podcast about moving your horse. You'll help them through it.
Yeah.
Did I want to remove Rocky? In the uh less than 6 months, that horse has been moved 3 times.
Right.
And in the last 2 years, that horse has been moved 7 times. Is that ideal for him? No. And do I have high expectations of him? I expect that he's connected to me and mindful and respectful because he's huge and I'm not.
Fair.
But that comes from having a very clear relationship and partnership with him. And when that's not there, I start asking questions. Why? Is it me? Sometimes I'm in a piss ass mood because I'm not happy where I'm at, or I'm not happy in that day. Right? So he's like, "You're in a piss ass mood. Can you get out of my space?"
I mean, holy shit, I'm just all of a
That's
sudden
fair.
realizing, like, what does your 23 other hours look like? And are you bringing an unregulated nervous system and you ate McDonald's for lunch and you feel like crap and your boss was a jerk to you and you're feeling socially depleted? And are you bringing that mess?
Right. And why not allow your horse to help ground you and regulate you and breathe and connect. I mean, I can't tell you how rewarding, especially at this time in our lives, my herd in my life. I'm hugging those horses heart to heart, long, long hugs and breathing and grounding, both of us, because we both need it. Not just me, not just them. We both need that connection. So yeah, it's always about the relationship and the two in it, and we can only be as good as we're living, as our environment. We have more control over our own selves, and sometimes we feel like we don't, but what are we doing for our horses? And can we be doing better is the question. And how is my horse thriving? That's always, is your horse cranky all the time? Well, why? Is it mental, emotional, physical? My horse is hyper and jumpy all the time. Well, why? Sometimes it's their food. Sometimes it's the way they feel. Sometimes it's the horse they're living next to.
Yeah.
So be curious. Ask questions. Follow your gut and let your horse tell you what's going on. So if you have any questions about the topics covered in this episode, send us a message on our Facebook page, Holistic Horsemanship and Husbandry, and we will answer your question in a post on our page. You will be anonymous. We'll just take the question and provide our input, and we want to do it on the post so that we can all learn and grow together, because nobody knows everything. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. We want to remind you that we'll be here every second and fourth Tuesday of the month, following the golden rule. Have a plan, but always be willing to be flexible. Don't forget to connect with us using the links in the show notes below.
If you learned something new today, had an aha, or walked away with a valuable nugget, you can say thanks by leaving us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening on.